Well, a very good morning to all our viewers at home and welcome to yet another exciting edition of your favorite program, Media Monitor, the show that gives you a complete analysis on the news that grip the headlines of the week. We're live here on the SABC News channel with myself, Alicia Jali. Thank you so much for tuning in. Here's the topics that we are tackling this morning. We start by asking what is going to stop the scourge of women and child abuse, and also analyze whether government will actually look into the reappointment of Brian Molefe. We then look into the NC's governance document discussion policy, which of course, as you know by now, we will be touching base with our reporter on the scene, Aldrin Sampier, who is at Luthuli House, and finally scrutinize whether the exit of General Motors was not politically motivated. But before we engage with our panel for all of that, let's first take a look at the headlines this morning. Tears were shed at graves, more bodies were discovered after a week of violence against women and children dominated headlines and social media platforms. Men marched to the center of power, a collective cry, "Not in my name," and an apology. 3-year-old Courtney Peters has been laid to rest in Belgaum, the Cape Flats. The toddler went missing for about a week before a body was found in a shallow grave at a nearby industrial area. The child had also been raped before she was killed. Meanwhile, in the Northwest, the NC Youth League has called for the death penalty to be reinstated for rapists and murderers of women. This came at the funeral of 15-year-old Nombuyiselo Nombewu, who was also brutally murdered this week. On the show today, we're very pleased to welcome our very own SABC digital multimedia producer, Mr. Neil Motlowo. Neil, good morning.
Morning, Alicia. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great.
Oh, awesome. Good to have you back. And of course, on the main desk, I do have Professor Stephen Friedman. Professor, a very good morning to you too. Thank you for returning.
Hi, morning, Alicia. Thank you.
Good morning. Now, what was the biggest hashtags this week? I can give you what I think it was all about. And that is basically what forms the basis of our show today.
Yes.
The femicide issues. What are we looking at here?
Here we're looking at Not In My Name. It's a hashtag that was started, that trended yesterday. A group of men gathered in Pretoria to protest against violence against women. When we look at the stats, it reached 4 million accounts on Twitter alone and created 4.6 impressions. Meaning that it did not only trend in South Africa, but it's something that is trending globally. So people are really talking about it. And if you look at the graphic properly, yesterday the tweets were high and at night it went up, but in the morning it also went up. So people are still talking about it. It's an ongoing topic.
Let's read some of the tweets that they're saying. That Uyanda Mbuli, one of the celebrities, local celebrities, says, "I'm so proud of South African men right now." And of course the hashtag Not In My Name march that took place yesterday.
This is also another personality, Lomo, saying, I applaud the man leading and participating in the Not In My Name march against women abuse in Pretoria today.
And of course, Karabo Mokoko there says, "May you all have a ridiculously amazing Saturday." To the men marching against women abuse at the hashtag Not In My Name march, and of course respect. I hear there were quite a few prominent members of society, particularly actors, that were part of the movement.
There was a tweet that was sent out by Casper Nyovest saying, why are politicians not out at this much? He was very much disappointed, but this is a topic that really has major personalities discoursing and taking part in it.
Professor, what did you make of this? The social media reactions to all this femicide that we've seen during the week. There was a lot of activism there, but is it enough?
Well, clearly not, Alicia, because women are still being killed and women are still being brutalized.
Yeah.
And I guess the problem we have is that the men who participate in the marches are not the men who are killing the women or acting violently towards the women. So you are having a specialist segment on it, but clearly we need very concrete solutions to this problem. It's good that people are angry, but angry is clearly not enough, because as South Africans, we don't seem to be able to deal with this problem.
Absolutely. You know what I found interesting? We had a reporter on the scene yesterday at the Not In My Name march, and we asked her if there was a memorandum that was particularly addressed to the police to try and assist with this. Because she says, yes, there was a memorandum, but they're not sure yet yet who that memorandum was going to be delivered to. But we're hoping to get some of further information as to what police are trying to do to help in this scourge. Let's move on with the next, of course, staying in the same topic of femicide. What are we looking at now, Neil?
This one is men are trash, which is a topic that has been going on
for trending.
A while now.
Yeah.
It started earlier, late last year, but this year around this time it
gained momentum.
And there's a lot of discourse around it. But so far, from what we got it this morning, 5 million accounts have been reached with 6.5 million impressions, meaning people saw it on their timeline. As you can see on the graph, I mean, it went up yesterday during the march, and late last night it went down, and it's up again today. So people are really talking about it.
So what was the general consensus when it came to this hashtag, Neil?
I mean, there are mixed reactions to it. Some men are coming out and saying not all men are trash, and then you have some are saying just because you're a man, you have to understand that your silence speaks loudly. That's why you fall under the men are trash. But we can look at tweets.
Let's have a look at those tweets. Inyasha McBride Mbani says the hashtag men are trash encompasses a wide range of issues, not only limited to beating women. Indeed, we are trash. There is a man who's owning up to something there. What is Astra saying?
Astra saying, so all the men who've fumed at men are trash have yet to say what they are doing to fight patriarchy, which came out this week also, rape culture and misogyny in our society.
And of course, the last one from Kalihot.com says, low-key getting tired of trying to convince closed-minded men and women that hashtag men are trash isn't about a man's ego. It's about a woman's plight. Very interesting point there. What do you make of that, Prof?
Well, look, I keep on not wanting to stray into your expert's field, but I think my analysis of what we're dealing with here, and it's not the only country in which it's happened, is if a group of people are used to dominating another group of people and they feel that's being threatened, then they tend to react in a very violent and a very bigoted sort of way. So what is happening here in some other countries is that for the first time women's rights are actually getting onto the agenda. Not enough, but they're on the agenda. And in the kind of culture we have, that really threatens some men, and they start to react violently. I mean, that's my reading of the situation.
My goodness, that's a very good point, that a lot of people feel that men feel entitled and also threatened or demasculized by a lot of things that, women are doing these days. Let's move on to the next big hashtag now and see what people are saying.
This is a poll, just to wrap up. I mean, Garabo's funeral was this week, so we asked this poll on social media, do you think we have the leadership, political or civil, to put an end to gender-based violence? And as you can see, the stats down there, I mean, 13% said absolutely, yes, absolutely, and 64% say no leadership at all.
That is worrying.
That is worrying. I mean, that's a huge number. I mean, out of 400 people who took part in this poll, and you have 13% say yes, but could be better.
But I mean, I'm just stuck on that 64%.
Yes. I mean, there were also reports from social media coming out that how do these political party leaders address gender violence when they were talking about women in parliament? I mean, Lindiwe Mazibuko, when she was dressed in that skirt. So they talked about a whole lot of things, especially with the rape cases that we've seen and stuff like that.
Do you want to comment quickly on that one, Prof?
Well, it's an understandable conclusion. I mean, we, as I said before, we really don't seem to be getting any further. If anything, the problem seems to be getting worse.
It's getting worse.
It's not surprising that many people are unhappy.
All right, let's take a look at the final poll today
that
now.
we did is we're talking about social network activism. Does hashtag activism work? And we have 48% saying yes and 52% saying no, because people need to go out and add their voice. But what we've seen with social media is that it is adding voice to what has been happening for a long time. I mean, the violence against women didn't just start this year. It's been there for years. Social media is just putting it in front of everyone.
Absolutely. Now, can you promise me that for the benefit of our viewers, and just to give us maybe a quick wrap next week, monitor how this trend will actually go about for the rest of this week, and also give us an update on how people were feeling after all, of course, the police investigations, so there's been some developments, so that we also get an update if whether our judiciary or there's certain structures that have been putting there are actually doing what they should be doing. That URL for our viewers once once again.
It's www.sabc.news, and on YouTube you can find us on SABC Digital News.
It's right there on your screen. No excuse. We're going to take a quick ad break, and after that...
And of course, we have someone, our visible policing, someone, our TRT, our intelligence, and our detectives. Also, we call the Metro Police to come and assist us.
Africa is getting more and more digitized, and people have to navigate through an increasingly connected world.
I did call my bae over here.
At school, I use my Wi-Fi.
On Network, we tell you about Africa's technology and social media landscape.
Politicians already do use Twitter a lot.
It's both Android and iOS compatible.
A solar charged box that includes everything, the computer, the projector.
That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 9 p.m.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, civil society groups as well as members of the public took a stand against the abuse of women with a men's march in Pretoria on Saturday. Now, this was, of course, a direct response to a spike in reports of women being murdered and raped in various parts of the country. Now, the march was carried out under the theme, Not in My Name. The spate of killings of women here in South Africa over the past 4 weeks has sparked public outcry as well as anger against women abuse and how men actually treat their partners. Police Minister Fikile Mbalula has expressed clear outrage at the recent killing of women and children in the country. Now, this, of course, follows the death of a 3-year-old Courtney Peters from Alsace River in Karabo Mokoena here in Johannesburg. Let's find out more on this clip.
As the body count rises, public display of outrage is growing.
There is more that we need to do as young South Africans. We need to gather, we need to demonstrate, and we need to actually voice out that it is enough. Women are getting raped right outside our doors.
We're creating awareness. People must know that as young black men, we take this issue seriously. Men are trash, and the way for us to stop the scourge is to address the issues head on.
The statistics are shocking. South Africa's female homicide rate is 6 times higher than the global average, and half of all murdered women are killed by an intimate partner. 147 sexual offences are reported every day. In 2016, over 350,000 sexual abuse cases involved 15 to 17-year-olds. A child goes missing every 6 hours, and on average 2,000 children are murdered every year. Every 6 hours, a woman is killed by an intimate partner. Civic group Women and Men Against Child Abuse wants all forms of sexual abuse and harassment to be taken as seriously as rape.
By the Johannesburg High Court on Monday, the 22nd of May 2017, in an effort to change the law to ensure that our legal system acknowledges the seriousness of all sexual offences cases and ensure that crimes of sexual assault do not prescribe regardless of the elapsed time since the offence.
Africans have taken to social media to vent their anger. The murder of Karabo Mokoena drew international attention. Shortly after her body was found, the hashtag Men Are Trash began to trend, with women sharing their own stories of abuse and violence. Featuring the hashtag Men Are Trash over the last 2 days reached more than 100,000. It sparked related hashtags including hashtag Not In My Name, hashtag Karabo Funeral, hashtag RIP Karabo, and hashtag Unpacking Trash. Lopang Alamu, SABC News.
Well, for this discussion, very pleased to be joined by two very powerful women. Let's welcome Major General Tebelo Mosekedi, Family Violence and Child Protection as well as Sexual Offences Investigations Unit of the SAPS, as well as gender activist Ms. Lisa Vetten from the Wits University Institute for Social as well as Economic Research. Ladies, a very good morning to you on such a sad note. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alicia.
Major General, let's start with you. We're hearing the stats are shocking. Our rate of murders is 6 times higher globally. Every 6 hours, a woman is killed by an intimate partner in the country. What is going on? What are we not doing correctly?
Thank you, Alicia, and let me pass my condolences to the families of the ladies and women who perished in the hands of the people that they loved, the people that they believe they will be safe with them. And on the statistics that has just been read, we are having a problem as a country. As Dr. Friedman indicated earlier, it's not only in South Africa, but what is happening in South Africa, it's more than what we can even imagine and talk about. We are having a very good document that we're looking forward to 2030, where we are saying we want to see everybody free and safe within South Africa, but the manner in which we are driving towards 2030, it is scary indeed. We are doing everything in our power as South African Police Service. We have established, there was a public outcry to re-establish the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Units that was aimed at doing a focused investigations and focusing on to handle the cases
Such
that will
cases,
be, yes, but the manner in which the rate is getting higher, despite the fact that we are having the hashtags, we are seeing the civil society and including the government going out and crying out that we cannot live in this type of society.
Absolutely
but
not.
It is escalating. As the statistics have just said, it's a crime of power. It's where somebody feels like I am in power, I am in charge. Who are you to tell me? And I want to say to women out there and ladies out there, really we need to be bold. We need to stand up and say, if it's not working for me, it cannot work for another woman.
Lisa, what do you think about all this?
Well, you know, Alicia, the statistics you gave actually date back to 1999.
Yeah,
so it's
it's
now
been an ongoing
2017.
problem.
Exactly. So I think in many ways, what concerns me is the way South Africa suddenly discovers this is a problem. Everybody runs around, gets upset for 2 weeks, because let's not forget, we did this in 2014 when Nanine Boyson and Reeva Steenkamp were murdered. And here we are in 2017, hashtagging, marching, getting terribly upset, but nothing is happening. And I think part of the difficulty here is that we mistake hashtag activism and speaking out and taking a stand as action. It's not. There are a lot of very concrete, boring, unimaginative things that we need to do that are not being done every single day. This is a problem that is not solved by talking. It is solved by action. So one of the things I would like to see happening, which hasn't happened and hasn't happened since 2015, is for the Minister of Police to sign off on a policy that was intended to address, number one, the investigation of serial rape in South Africa, and number two, reducing barriers to the reporting of these crimes of rape and domestic violence. That hasn't happened. So, you know, we need to say to the Minister, when are you going to get around to doing that? One also wants to issue a challenge to the Minister of Social Development. In 2013, there was an integrated program of action to address violence against women and children. It has never been publicly released and it has never been consulted around. So I think, you know, we should, yes, it's all very well to say not in my name, but we need to be actually going to those who said they were doing something but have never done so and asking for their accountability. So if we just stop, you know, with hashtags every few years.
You know, Lisa, another issue here that has been brought to light, and Major General, I want to press this question to a lot of women. Apparently, Lisa is saying that this has been been an ongoing problem, but the issue is apparently women are scared to even report some of these abuses because the police won't even treat a case with the dignity that it deserves.
We have in these units, and we have expanded from 176 units to 182 units. So if a person reports at the police station and it's not getting joy from the police station, the instruction is very clear. you follow up with the station commander of that a particular police station, and there is nothing that stops you from calling the hotline, South African Police Service hotline, that is on the global list, that you can call and you voice out. Social Development recently has published and launched the hotline where women can call either to get counseling through that line.
Yes, Major General, we understand Karabo had actually opened a case, but it wasn't given any attention. I mean, as a woman, what do you say to that? Are you going to further look into that? Is that police department going to be looked into for their lack of action in the matter?
The matter received attention, Alicia. The case was reported, and there was a counter charge between Karabo and the perpetrator at the time, or the alleged accused person. But then I'm very skeptical to discuss that, because it is part of the ongoing investigation. But I did receive a report from the province on the progress that was made in that matter, and all those dockets, the 3 cases that were reported by Karabo, the perpetrator, and the current case is investigated by one person who is in the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit, so that we can give it that attention it deserves. It will receive that attention it deserves. Most of the time when a woman report an abuse, as I've indicated earlier, that it's power, I think the man feels like, now I should take it a step further. Because if a case
to
of
silence them,
and to silence those around, and my appeal is, the reports are saying the friends of Karabo were also aware that Karabo is in this
the
abusive.
family was even aware, yeah?
Yes, it's not only Karabo that should do that. So the Karabos out there, it's not only you who can report. If any citizen, any adult citizen, it's noticing that there is something wrong that is happening in this relationship, you have that latitude to come and report that this is happening with this particular individual for any assistance, whether with the police, or we can report that matter and request the assistance from other organizations. There are a lot of organizations that have came forward to assist the police, and we encourage that they should be more. I think I'm glad that social media is now taking it. Maybe, Lisa, with the noise that the social media is now putting on the matter, it should not lie down, because immediately when it lies down, the perpetrators out there are saying, it's fine, they have forgotten about everything, then they start all over again.
But Major General, Lisa says, we can march as much as we want, but I mean, we need to practically do some things. I mean, we need to start looking at some new rules to effect,
Lisa. If I can come in here, I mean, Major General Mosekile is with the Specialist Detective Unit.
Yes.
They investigate cases. They're not the people who receive the cases standing behind the counter in the police station, and that's where the problem lies. If we look at the Domestic Violence Act, it places a whole number of duties on the police and things they're supposed to do when you come and lay a complaint. We have very significant problems there. We've had now, I've counted 6 cases brought against the police where they failed to act in the case of protection order. The woman has either been raped, or a family member's been murdered, or a child has been murdered, because the police did not act at the time. And one of the things one has suggested is that, in 2009, it's the only year for which we have statistics. 55 women of those who were killed that year by their partner actually had a protection order at the time they were murdered.
My goodness.
So the question you have to ask is, how many of those tell us something about men who are not deterred by the law, and how many of those cases were a result of police negligence? And one of the things we'd like to see is...
And also, how effective are those police orders?
Well, they can be effective, but you need the police to act on them. So what we want to see is a panel set up to look at all cases where somebody does die when they hold protection order, to investigate, was there negligence, or do we need to understand more about this particular group of men who are not deterred by the law? And that would be in the policy if the Minister ever signs it.
All right, Major General, what can you say to that, and your final words as well, to reassure communities out there that you are on the job and you are looking at ways to deal with the scourge as it happens?
Alicia, we're not only looking at taking dockets to court at Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual
After the deed has been done
also. unfortunately, we are reactive unit. We're trying very hard to also partner with every organization, with the visible policing when they are doing their awareness campaigns, to be there and explain, because we will be having dockets, we will be analyzing what is inside the dockets, what are the challenges, what are the gaps that we are still experiencing when we do our investigation. So we communicate that with the civil society and other organizations.
So Lisa is aware of all of this, Major General.
I will engage more. I will engage more just 2 years. And we have on the serial rape within the family violence, child protection and sexual offences, we're now having a focus group of investigators that are only looking at the serial rapist cases.
Major General, I just want you to do me one more favor. You did announce a line that people can actually call to follow up on their cases, or if they're dissatisfied with the progress on their case. Can you please give it to our viewers once again?
The SAPS line is 08600 10111.
All right. That number again?
08600 10111.
All right, and that's where you're going to find all the help that you need. Thank you very much, ladies, and of course, keep doing the great work that you're doing. That was SAPS Major General Tebelo Musigidi and gender activist Ms. Lisa Vetten from the Wits Institute for Social as well as Economic Research, giving us some insight on the recent spate of violence faced by women and children in the country. Thank you for your time this morning, ladies. We're going to take a quick ad break, and after that,
I was also surprised because when he left, he indicated that for good governance and he would want to clear his name. I can just say I'm surprised.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
You're watching Media Monitor. State-owned power utility Eskom is continuing to hog the headlines. Now, lately it has been its reappointment of Brian Molefe as its CEO. And of course, Public Enterprise Minister Lynn Brown is accused of misleading Parliament over a Gupta-linked company, as well as former Mineral Resources Minister Ngwako Ramatlhodi's recent revelation that Eskom board chairman Ben Gumane and Molefe tried to force him to suspend natural resources giant Glencore's mining licenses, a move that would lead to it shutting it down. Meanwhile, Eskom's nuclear chief officer Dave Nichols told delegates at the Africa Utility Week conference that there won't be any room for corruption in South Africa's proposed nuclear energy deal, and that nuclear power is actually the only option to secure future energy supply, because renewable energy still faces obstacles like energy storage. Let's take a look at this insert.
Brian Molefe received a generous welcome from Eskom employees as he reported for work earlier this week, just months after stepping down from the power utility. The joyful Molefe thanked his colleagues for a warm reception.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I just want to reiterate that we must continue with our mission of keeping the lights on.
Molefe's return comes amid a picket by DA and COP members who are opposed to his reappointment. The DA has also filed an urgent application to interdict his return.
We've asked for an urgent meeting in Parliament where Eskom has come and briefed the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises, but because these wheels do sometimes move slowly, as we speak, our lawyers are currently at the Pretoria Gauteng North High Court, where we are lodging papers to stop his appointment with immediate effect.
Their dissatisfaction with their appointment and summoned Minister of Public Enterprise to their headquarters.
Our discomfort with the decision, our unhappiness with the decision, the matter having been dealt with, it is now been referred to government for further processing, based on the discussions we've had.
Public Protector Busiswe Mkhwebana said she was surprised by Molefe's return.
I was also surprised because when he left, he indicated that for good governance and he would want to clear his name. I can just say I'm surprised. Now is sub judice, because once at least it's ventilated in court, then we will know if the court decides that the investigation, it must go back to the public protector. It will give us an opportunity then to investigate further those contracts in Eskom, get the details, even give the very implicated people an opportunity to give their side of the story.
In the midst of Eskom wars, former Mining Minister Ngwakora Matlodi made astounding allegations against Molefe and Eskom board chair Ben Ngubane.
The meeting happened in my office, so there's a record of the meeting. It did not happen in the trees and anywhere, and they came together to my office at the time to discuss the issues that have been public, in the public domain for the whole day.
I'm just Google-eyed, Professor. What do you think about all these developments? Let's start with the reinstatement of Brian Molefe as the CEO and, of course, the backlash that it has received.
Well, it's a backlash for two reasons. I mean, first of all, there's a legal issue here because, of course, he seemed to have resigned. He's been reappointed to a position which was supposed to be advertised. So that the courts will sort out. But, of course, as we're seeing from the clips here, this is also dividing not only the country, but the African National Congress. So the official position of the African National Congress, which Zizi Kodwa conveyed, is that this is unacceptable.
Yes.
So we do have a very serious conflict over Eskom, but of course, as the clip showed, this is not only about Eskom. It's about the relationship between, once again, government and particular companies and a particular family, etc. And we're seeing the extent to which this is now really dividing the African National Congress around the middle. I mean, obviously the DA is trying to get in on this as the opposition party, but that is not the main story. The main story is that when you have the official spokesperson of the governing party going on media to say this is unacceptable, then you have a very serious situation.
But then, I mean, Professor, let's bring in the minister here, Lynn Brown. I mean, we do know for a fact that she's a deployee of the ANC, and she says, I mean, this was the only option that, that was going to save government money instead of giving Molefe the 30 million rand. We spoke about this last week, but her reasonings, according to, as to why she reinstated Brian Molefe, do you think they
I think people are very sceptical. I mean, it's a very strange argument to make. If somebody demands this huge package, and you say, well, instead of giving them a huge package, you give him a fancy job. The obvious point besides that is, when he's finished the fancy job, is he not going to demand another huge package?
Yeah.
So it really is a very, she may be expressing the fact that she found herself under a great deal of pressure. But I think publicly, people find it very hard to believe that you give somebody an important job like this because you don't want to pay him a package.
Very interesting indeed. Now, let's talk about what former Minister of Mineral Resources, Ngwakora Matlodi, revealed this week about the so-called families. What do you read into those?
Well, I think we're going to see more and more of this because you see what is happening is that this is unraveling to a certain extent in the ANC. So previously, people who were unhappy about this, like former Minister Ramatlodi, were for political reasons deciding it was sensible to keep quiet. He's now been thrown out of the cabinet. He has no reason to keep quiet anymore. And I think we're going to see more and more of this because, once this sort of thing starts happening, because clearly something happened which we need to be concerned about. Once it starts happening, people start to talk. And once some people start to talk, other people start to talk. And of course, at the beginning, as we're seeing, there are just heated denials. Mr. Ramatlodi is making it all up. Former Deputy Minister Jonas was making it all up. But these things start to mount up. So I think we're in the we're in the middle of a process here in which we're going to be hearing more and more about what's been going on in these contracts, etc. And I think it's going to put a lot more pressure on those people in the governing party who defend this sort of thing.
Now, Professor, we know that you were speaking about legal aspect of this matter. We know that the DA, as well as I think 3 other political parties, have actually joined the fray to take this matter to the court to block this reinstatement. But what can you tell us in terms of how this process will unfold? What can we know in terms of what are the rules when it comes to hiring somebody who's either resigned or, as they claim, he didn't resign, he left because of good governance?
Well, you see, this is the point. I mean, there have been legitimate criticisms that far too many of these issues go to court.
Do we blame the board then, Prof? That's what I'm
Well, you
trying to
have
get
to blame
at.
the board. Of course you have to blame the board if this was, because clearly the board...
So it's the board and the minister, and who else do we... I mean, it's a chain of people.
No, well, it is the board and it is the minister, and I suppose if you want to, you have to ask questions of the president, because the president is head of the cabinet, etc. But you see, this is a straightforward legal issue. Are you entitled to, without an interview, reappoint somebody who resigned? The perception is, the courts must decide that the board is thinking of all sorts of excuses to justify reinstating a chief executive who they never wanted to see go in the first place.
Let's now talk about the big news, which is the nuclear deal. And it seems like Eskom says that, they're going to go ahead. Of course, we do know that the ruling was saying the processes were not properly followed. But, I mean, the deal could still be put through. What do you make of those revelations?
Well, the deal can still be put through if you go through the process.
Yes.
But you see, people, I don't think, realize what going through the process means.
What does it mean,
There are all sorts of steps. Well, you have to advertise it. You have to have a proper tender process. It has to be transparent. And even if you have the proper tender process, very often the people who don't win from the tender process are entitled to go to court and say, look, we don't think that this was a fair process. So I think the reason why it is important that they have to go through the process, the perception is being created that the reason this deal is going forward is that there are business relationships between people in government and people outside government who would be advantaged from this. The whole idea of tender processes are they're supposed to stop that sort of thing happening. Of course, there's the other issue which is still out there, which is that there are a lot of people who feel that as a country we simply can't afford this deal. Now, that's a political issue. It's not an issue which goes through the courts. But in order to have a nuclear deal which satisfies the courts, government is going to handle this in a very different way to the way it's been handled.
And Eskom's explanation that the nuclear deal is to secure future power supply, do you think that's relevant? And I mean, Mr. Nichols even said so himself.
Well, look, it's not outrageous, but the point that you have to ask yourself is this the safest form of power?
Can we afford
Is it the most affordable form of power? The bottom line is that you want South Africans to receive safe power in the cheapest way possible. And there are a lot of questions about whether nuclear is the best way to do that.
Well, that's the professor's words. We're going to take a quick ad break. More Media Monitor coming up after this.
Do you support the calls made by Blayton Nzimande and Solly Mapaila?
It is not a call by Comrade Solly Mapaila and Comrade Blayton Nzimande. It is the position of the party.
Yes.
And the position of the party, we support it unambiguously.
Why?
The theory of the revolution, in simple terms, was that revolutionary forces are going to take charge of the state. And having taken charge of the state, they are going to transform the state to eventually transform society.
Join me in Port Said live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
Well, welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, the ANC's continuous loss in electoral support will come under sharp focus this morning as the party addresses the media on its legislature as well as governance policy discussion document. Now, this, of course, ahead of next month's policy conference set to take place out in Nasrec. Let's go live to our reporter, Aldrin Sampier, who is at Luthuli House. Aldrin, a very good morning to you. The ANC, they're saying continuous loss of support in urban areas poses a serious challenge for the party in 2019. Tell us all about that.
Well, certainly what the party has done is that they've looked at the diagnosis of what happened in 2016 during the local government elections and saying that looking at the support vote that they got, although it was a majority vote, just over 50%, that's the votes that the party was managed to garner. However, though, there is quite specifically focus on what happened in Gauteng, looking at, for instance, the city of Tshwane, losing the city of Tshwane, and also losing Joburg to the opposition party, to a coalition of opposition parties. And the party says that if you look in Gauteng, for instance, compared to any other province, it says that the amount of votes that they received in Gauteng compared to the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, Free State, as well as the Northwest, all of those four provinces combined, the ANC got more votes in Gauteng compared to those four other provinces, which is something quite interesting considering where the party finds itself at this moment, considering that we're heading into the 2019 elections. And if you speak to some analysts as well, it said they would argue that it points to a fact that the ANC is becoming what they call a rural party, a rural political party, where most of its support base is coming from areas that are quite rural, and it's losing the support of people in urban areas such as Gauteng. And if you speak to any other person of the ANC, particularly here in Gauteng, they'll tell you that, listen, these are nail-biting moments heading into the 2019 elections because expectations are that if they do not pull up their socks, if they do not fix what has gone wrong, one of the things that they say is, for instance, people not pitching to go and vote, and also losing support within these urban areas. If they don't fix those issues, then the party could lose Gauteng. So this is something that's quite interesting and intriguing that you have such an admission from the party.
But Aldrin, let's talk about that. I mean, speaking of the big metros, I mean, this has also raised the debate on policy coalitions and how the party actually plays effective opposition party. Speak to us about that.
Well, certainly, if you look at the city of Joburg, look at the city of Tshwane, for instance, the ANC has been in the majority ever since 1994. It has been in charge of those municipalities when there were first municipalities and also becoming metros. And now the party finds itself in a situation in these two metros as well as Nelson Mandela Bay, Mogale City as well, where it finds itself on the opposition benches, and now it needs to play an effective role as an opposition party. And if you speak to reporters as well about this, whether the ANC is playing an effective role as being an opposition party, they'll tell you that the party is probably failing. And if you look at what happened, for instance, in the Western Cape and the city of Cape Town, when the ANC first lost the city of Cape Town, it was on the opposition benches, and some say that if what happened in the city of Cape Town and if what happened in the Western Cape as well is anything to go by, it shows you that the ANC has not been able to master the art of being in the opposition benches. How do you make sure that those who are in power are held accountable, but also that your voice as an opposition member is not drowned, considering that you are the governing party nationally at a national level. However, though, at these local municipalities, you are sitting on the opposition benches. Another critical question, of course, is the issue around the coalitions. And the party says that there will be difficult relationships in terms of coalitions that it will have to go into heading into these elections. Of course, you know, for instance, what happened last year with the EFF, when the EFF made a few proposals and said, listen, we are willing to go into an election, into a coalition with you guys, if you will fire President Jacob Zuma as the president of the country, and also if you change Section 25 of the Constitution to allow for land expropriation without compensation, as well as amend the constitution. So you have parties that would come into such coalitions with very strict demands and very hard demands that the ANC perhaps might not be able to deliver on. And this is why the ANC is saying that sometimes they will go ahead into very difficult relationships when it comes to coalitions.
Aldrin, just stay right there. I just want to get a quick comment from Professor Stephen Friedman when we talk about coalitions, because we saw last year when the final results were about to come out and people had to start thinking about going into talks about coalitions. It wasn't very easy for the ANC. Do you think this is going to help?
Well, I think the ANC certainly needs to talk about coalitions, because as the numbers show, they may have to land up in a coalition after the last election. You know, it's a question of whether our political parties across the board are actually used to the kind of negotiation which is necessary when you go into a coalition.
Go on, Professor.
No, because you see, I mean, look, the EFF has made certain demands, etc. Yes. That is the way it's supposed to happen. But of course, then there's supposed to be a give and take, and they're supposed to reach some sort of agreement. If you can't have a coalition, and that's something people aren't talking about enough, we do have this in some cities, you know, you can have a minority government. And a minority government is what we have in Joburg and Tshwane at the moment. So if they can't reach coalitions, one of the parties which doesn't have a majority is the government, and then they have to get the cooperation of opposition parties. It's an entirely new way of doing politics, and South Africans are not used to that way of doing politics yet. But the ANC's problem is that at the governing party, it's not used to that. And so it's going to have to learn that whole process.
All right, Aldrin, let's quickly wrap up with you now. Just on the final point, there's been a lot also of regulatory proposals that are being made, including, of course, whether a neutralized person should become an office bearer, like become president or premier, and also regulating faith-based organizations. What can we expect to hear around that?
Well, Alicia, this is something quite interesting, and even if you look at the document, it only has a small segment in the document. The ANC doesn't explain how they've come to this debate or what has sparked this debate on whether a naturalized person should become a president or should become an office bearer, like a premier or even a councillor, a mayor for that matter. But if you look at the Constitution says, Chapter 5 of the Constitution says, of course, that the president would be elected from members of the National Assembly. Well, members of the National Assembly, anyone can be a member of the National Assembly as long as you are over the age of 18 and you are a South African. Listen to what happened, the case in point being Phumzile van Dam, the spokesperson of, the national spokesperson of the DA. She was naturalized and she was allowed to be a member of parliament because she is now considered to be a South African. So now what the ANC is asking is that should such a person be allowed to be elected to become president of the country, or even a premier, or even a mayor of the country? So they have to find a way of how do you balance out what the Constitution says in terms of who becomes a member of parliament or who becomes a member of a legislature compared to what they are calling for, and asking the question on whether such a person who was born in a foreign land would be allowed to become a premier, a president, or a mayor.
Aldrin will cross to you live when those visuals become available to us. That is Aldrin Sampier live to us from Luthuli House. And remember, stay tuned to SABC News because we will be taking that media briefing live right here on air. After the break,
Isuzu is still going to continue to operate. They will be investing, but nobody knows what is the scope of that particular investment. It could be that at the beginning that few jobs would be created, and that's the difficulty of shareholders who just cater for themselves, who don't care for workers.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant, a life dedicated in service of the people.
The result means that swallows
out of the ABC Municipal League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
This was announced on Thursday. The company released a statement. Welcome back to Media Monitor. General Motors has quit operations in South Africa, and this was of course announced on Thursday as the company released a statement citing that the decision was made after the company was not making enough profit to keep the corporation afloat. Now, GM currently has 1,500 employees here in the country, and the impact of the disinvestment on them is quite unclear, although it appears likely there will be some job losses. Isuzu Motors South Africa is expected to be taking over from the vehicle manufacturing plant by January 2018. And to keep this in perspective, South Africa is not the only affected country. GM also said it would exit India, and it said in March it would also leave Europe. Let's take a quick look at this insert.
Retirement packages have already been offered to GM employees since last year.
There's just over 1,500 employees at the company today. This is the proposed restructure of our business, and the change to the operations really initiates a consultation process with all of our employees, which starts effectively today.
And so this is strictly a global decision based on where GM thinks that we can get the best returns on our investments going forward.
And for this discussion, very pleased to be joined on the line by Ms. Phakamile Hlubi, NUMSA spokesperson, who will give us some insight into whether their union was consulted by the vehicle manufacturing company and how this is going to affect their members. A very good morning to Ms. Hlubi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Maybe, Ms. Hlubi, just clarify to us, were you properly consulted about this?
Indeed not. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa learned with shock on Thursday that General Motors was planning to disinvest from South Africa. General Motors is well aware that we are a majority union in that organization. We are a recognized trade union, and the process that should have been followed is that they should have consulted with our members before making that announcement in a general meeting as they did that day. So, no, we were not consulted. We found out the same way that everybody else found out about the shocking announcement.
Phakamile, we know that NUMSA is also meeting with their lawyers on this matter. What update can you give us on that matter?
Well, as you know, this announcement was made very recently. So we are still in consultation with our attorneys. We're trying to find if there's any kind of legal avenue that we can pursue with regards to this issue. But more importantly, we have to meet with the management of General Motors. That's expected to take place sometime this week, where we get details about the nature of the restructuring and also how it will affect employees. Because as things stand, we don't know how it's going to affect our members or to what extent there will be job losses.
All right, Phakamile, thanks for answering that. I just want you to answer this. I mean, there's been rife speculation if GM's decision to leave South Africa could have been influenced by, of course, some of the economic as well as political stance or developments in the country. What is your stance as NUMSA on this?
Well, really, I think like many South Africans, we are still in the dark about what were the major reasons that motivated General Motors to leave South Africa. But I think we must also look at what's taking place globally. General Motors made the same announcement in India as well, that it's disinvesting.
Yeah.
So perhaps the local political situation may not have played a role. What we suspect may have played a greater role in the decision is Donald Trump's announcement. I mean, he said it even during the campaign trail and also when he was elected president, that he would put America first, and in so doing, he would drastically reduce taxes for corporations doing business in America. So we think that was probably part of the motivation.
Phakamile, thank you so much for that sound analysis. That is NUMSA spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi giving us the latest on GM pulling out of the country. A quick one, Prof.
I agree that this has got, there's all the stories about how this is no confidence in South African politics. That's nonsense. I mean, it's clearly, there's a global trend here which we need to be worried about. What we really need to be looking at in this issue is that it shows once again that we cannot rely on old-style manufacturing businesses to create jobs for South Africans.
Absolutely.
We need new ideas on how South Africans who can't get into those jobs can earn a decent living.
Thank you so much. Professor Stephen Friedman joining me in his lonesome in studio today. But thank you so much for all the sound analysis as always. And thank you for watching our show. We are back next week, same time and place. That is right here on the SABC News channel at 9 o'clock. I'll see you then. And of course, on top of the hour, I'm back with AM News. Stay tuned for that. Goodbye for now.
To be African is beautiful. To be African is a privilege.
It represents